You know it's Jane Austen July when you're having an animated conversation with your adult child and you say to her, "Daughter, do you take delight in vexing me?" Hello Booktube, and welcome back to my channel. And yes, it is Jane Austen July, and I've just finished Sense and Sensibility, and I'll tell you about it in a little while without spoilers. But first I wanted to talk about some books that are delighting me in the last weeks of June and since July started. And a book that I talked about in my mid-year freak out book tag was Nilda. And I can't stop thinking about this book because in the back of my mind, it was reminding me of another book that I really, really loved, one of my favorite books of all time, and that is A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. Yes, these are both told in a child narrator's voice. They're all coming of age. Bill's guns Roman. I just learned that term last year. So why do I say that these books are alike? Yes, the child narrators are both girls of 10 years old, and they both go on to be about 15 or 16 in Nilda's case, and maybe 17 in Francie's case in A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith. They're both very autobiographical, though they are novels, and the difference is they're about 25 to 30 years apart. They're both in New York City. One is one takes place in Brooklyn, of course, and the other takes place in El Barrio, which is East Harlem, Manhattan. But this, and also one is pre-war and one is during the Second World War. But despite all of those differences, the similarities are so striking that it made me want to tell you about it, what I felt about it. One difference is that Nilda is not a well-known book, and it should be. It's written by Nicholasa Mohr, who was a Nuyorican, which I said last time is a Puerto Rican New Yorker. But I never heard of her, even though I'm a Nuyorican. And until I read a quote by many Nuyorican, including Manuel Lin Miranda, who wrote Hamilton and In the Heights, who said that this book was a big influence on him, and other people who mentioned this author, Nicholasa Mohr. I never heard of her, and she should be more well known. She was also an artist. She's still alive, by the way, and the book, it goes into very similar trajectories as A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. They both have difficult relationships with their mothers. They're both dealing with poverty, and they both are wonderful students in the sense that they want to get ahead. They have wonderful desire to succeed no matter what. They're both very determined girls, and I love both of these books. And I really suggest that if you love A Tree Grows in Brooklyn as much as I do, then you will love Nilda. They also deal with prejudice. In A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, Betty Smith was brought up actually in my neighborhood, but from 1900 to 1920. And the German Irish population was the most prevalent in that neighborhood. But there's a lot of Jewish not a lot, but there's anti-Semitism in the book, and I think that Betty Smith put that in on purpose to show that this is what she heard as a child growing up in a mostly German New York. And there are a few instances where she wants to bring that out, that Francie was not aware of racial prejudice, but that's what she was taught. And in Nilda, the horrible prejudice against the newly arrived Puerto Ricans who were Americans, who are Americans, is not that it's right in any newcomer, but is really like a West Side Story. In fact, it reminded me a little of West Side Story. So I suggest that if you like A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, you will love Nilda. And that's all I'll say about those two books. And that it delighted me. I said that in my last video. Another book that delighted me is Point Zero by Seicho Matsumoto. And I was very fortunate to get this in Canada in a wonderful bookstore, Upstart and Crow. And like I said in my last video, the owner of the bookshop, or the person who worked there, told me that I would not find it in Hawaii, and I didn't, and I couldn't even find it on Goodreads except in French, as I said. And he is a master crime writer. If you love Golden Age mysteries, translated, but so like in Agatha Christie. So if you like Agatha Christie, you will like Point Zero. So let me just tell you a little bit about Point Zero in case you didn't watch my last video. And if you didn't watch my videos, please press the notification bell so you'll be notified on all the videos that I make. So this takes place in post-war Japan, which is a very fascinating time to watch how the country is dealing with the afterwar of the terrible, how Tokyo was left after the war. But this is more 1958, so it's still fresh in their minds, but they're going to a new place, a new time. And it's, as I said, it's told in the voice of a woman, which I appreciated very much, Teiko, who marries Kenichi Uhara, who's 10 years her senior, through a go-between matchmaker. And what I loved about it is that she was like not interested in getting married, but something about, she was in her 20s, but she was refusing the matches that were made, and so she met Kenichi. And in their honeymoon, when they're just getting to know each other, he disappears, and she decides to be a detective in some sense. She has people, a couple of men who help her along the way, but she's very independent, and I like the way that she is portrayed in this book as post-war Japanese woman, still, you know, under the man as Japan's society is, but determined, and I like that. And it also has to do with the Pon girls, the prostitutes catering to American GIs during the war, and how that after the war, that affected the society. And I don't want to go into it because it goes into spoilery, but if you can get this, get this. So after I read Point Zero, and it's on a very treasured spot on my bookcase, I took out of the library another book by Seicho Matsumoto, and winner of the Akutsagawa Literary Prize, the Mystery Writers of Japan Prize, and it is Inspector Imanishi Investigates. So they're alike. These books are alike in that they're both based on the Golden Age mystery. So if you enjoy that, that's so hard to find in present time. And if you also like the photo that I liked of the writer, please get this book. I haven't finished it yet, but I'm enjoying it very much. And I'll just tell you a little bit what it's about. It's about a man who's a working man's clothes, who's found dead in the tracks of a train in Tokyo. Nobody knows who he is, and Inspector Imanishi decides that he's going to make sure that he solves this case. And it's delightful so far. I love the cover with the tracks, because that's how it starts, finding a body in the tracks. And I lived in Japan, and I remember an anecdote that I'll tell you. I went for a job as a teacher. I was trained as a TEFL teacher, teaching English as a foreign language. And I went to an interview where there were a lot of people. I was one of the oldest people there. I was then in my early 50s. And they asked the question to the group of us, is it ever allowable to be late to a job? And one Western girl, she was from England, she says, only if there's a suicide on the train. And I was saying, what do you mean, a suicide? And then they said, they didn't say anything, but they were like, okay, you're right. And there are many suicides on the railway train, and I'm going to put down here the railway station in the city that I was living in, because she mentioned that specifically. And I lived at that time, I was living with my daughter in Osaka. So this is the reason why I was told that a lot of the salarymen who were going to commit suicide were being compensated by the railway where they did that unliving themselves, and they would get money if they did that. So, which is very sad in a lot of ways, but the salarymen in Japan, they have a hard time of it. They work. Every time I was on a train, whether it be day or night, they were going home. They were on the train, going home and sleeping, or they would go to a bar. And there is a bar in this book too. There's a lot of wonderful Japanese, not only history, because it's in the 50s, but cultural references that I think you'll enjoy, plus the fact that it's a Golden Age mystery. So if you like either of these books, you'll like the other one. Well, it's the same author, but I plan to find every book that was translated. And I should say that the translator on one of these books is different than the other. This is Beth Carey, who translated Inspector Imanishi. And this was translated a little while back. This was translated in 1960, first published in 1961 in Tokyo, under the Japanese title Vessel of Sand, Suna no Utsuwa, and the translated copy 1989 by Seicho Matsumoto. So I recommend both of these books, even though I haven't finished this one yet. I just know it's going to be a good book. Maybe not as good as this one, but time will tell. So what else have I been reading that I really like? I started another book by Nicholasa Mohr, which is a children's book. not a young adult book, but a middle grade book, I would say. That's what they're called now. We call them children's books, but back in the day. And this is called Felita, but pictures by Ray Cruz. So even though Nicholasa Mohr, all her own pictures were in Nilda, she had Ray Cruz do the illustrations for this book. And I showed you this. It shows a neighborhood. And so what is it about? So when Felita walks down her block, she can say hello to everyone. Every minute, there's Gigi and her other friends, Doña Josefina in the bodega, and old Bernie, who always sits outside with his cat, Mr. Roosevelt. Some of her favorite games are played on the street, and Abuelita, her grandmother, lives nearby. She can't understand why her parents would want to move to a better neighborhood. Don't they realize that this neighborhood is her world? So I love the cover also, showing a very happy Felita. So if you're into reading middle grade books, which I thought I wasn't, but I was wrong, I really think that you should read everything by Nicholasa Mohr. She also has a book about short stories about the Bronx. So maybe I'll talk about that another time. So another book I read a little earlier than this week was Philip Roth's Patrimony. And I have mixed feelings about this book. Not so much the book as the author. This is one of his so-called, I shouldn't say so-called, it's a true story. He says it's a true story, and I don't doubt it. The writing, I love his writing, except when he gets to the end for some reason. And has become a problem for me for many authors, that they sometimes they don't know how to end a book satisfactorily. I mean, according to my standards anyway, maybe my standards are too high. So Philip Roth's father was a very interesting person, almost as interesting as Philip Roth himself. And there's a picture of Philip Roth in the back. And he's passed away now. But he had a very special relationship with his father. His father was a very difficult person. His mother, who passed away before his father, found him to be a difficult person. In fact, in the beginning of the book, he recounts that she wanted to divorce him, really late in life. And he was saying, it's too late now to divorce him. But maybe it wasn't. But so to give you a flavor of what he says, I don't want to argue with anyone. I never argue. If I tell her something, I only tell it to her for her own good. If she doesn't want to listen, the hell with her. So he's not talking about his wife there. He's talking about one of his girlfriends. He's a widower, retired insurance manager, and he's suffering from a brain tumor and fighting death. And this is affecting his son, of course, who loves him very much, who has made a big impression on his life. And I wanted to read you something that, to give you another flavor of what Philip Roth says during this book about his father. I must remember accurately, I told myself. Remember everything accurately, so then when he is gone, I can recreate the father who created me. You must not forget anything. And I think that writing this book helped him not to forget anything. I say that I have a problem with Philip Roth because after I read this and loved his writing, loved how much he loved his father, the way he portrayed his father in honesty, I also found out that another one of the characters, the real life characters in this book, his wife, who was Claire Bloom, who was an actress that I particularly admired. and this is an aside, but one of my favorite fairy tales is Beauty and the Beast, and I'm not talking about the Disney version exactly. I'm talking about when I was in 1958, and I found this out by doing a little digging. Claire Bloom played the Beauty in The Beauty and the Beast, and the whole story affected me so much, and the beautiness, the gorgeousness of Claire Bloom in that TV presentation was so affecting to me as a child that I'm going to try to find a photo of her in Beauty and the Beast and put it here. If I can, I'll try my best, because I remember it was 1957, and to me she was the most beautiful, kind person in the world. So yeah, so he didn't treat her very well. He doesn't say that in the book, but in other books, he wrote a book that I don't remember the name of, and I don't want to because I'm not going to read it. He really tears her apart, and they were married quite a long time, and it seemed like everything about her annoyed him. And he also could be very cruel, not unlike his father. But anyway, if you want to read it, it was a good read. I thought the ending wasn't as strong, but it seems like I always say that. To end this video, I want to talk a little bit about Sense and Sensibility, which I started. Jane Austen July, I was in a funk in the beginning of the month, really toward the end of June, for a lot of reasons that I talked about before. And the minute I started reading the wonderful language of Jane Austen and became immersed in her world, I felt happier, and I couldn't stop reading it. In fact, I read it up to 3 o'clock in the morning to finish it. However, I was disappointed toward the end of the book, and then I realized that there was a movie made of this that I remember vaguely. One thing, I didn't remember any of the story. This is one of the only Jane Austens that I haven't reread recently, and so it was all new to me. And until we got to almost to the beginning of the end, I was enjoying the words, I was enjoying the characters up to a point. It's a story of two sisters, as most of you know, and one is very different from the other. One is sensible, and one is very sensitive. So, and how they go about life. There's a lot of characters in this book, and I had to go back a couple of times and say, who is this again? So that was a little, it wasn't annoying really. It was just that it was maybe that I needed to read it closer. And I think I am going to start reading it again, because some of I think the beginning and the middle of this book is as good as Pride and Prejudice in my view. And then the end, it sort of fizzled out, and it was like, okay, then this happened and this happened and this happened, and the end. But you have to remember that Sense and Sensibility, I think more than any of her other main novels, is a morality tale, a Victorian morality tale. And of all of her books, even Mansfield Park, I felt that this book felt more Victorian to me in a lot of ways, which is not bad. I mean, we're reading Jane Austen because we like that period. But I don't know, I would like to read more about why she ended it the way she did, and why there was no scenes at the end. Like there was beautiful, wonderful dialogue and scenes all through, and then at the end, like I said, it was okay, and this happened, and you know, this is the end, this is the end, and this is how this ended, and this ended. Okay, the end. Of course, with a beautiful, probably last sentence, like she always does. But anyway, if you've read Sense and Sensibility, if you're part of the group that is reading Sense and Sensibility, let me know. I've read a little, not a review, but Marissa of Blatantly Bookish, who is one of the co-hosts this year, said that this was her least favorite of Jane Austen's books because of the caricatures of maybe the two sisters or other people in other characters in the book. However, I loved it. It made me happy, and it made me happy when I first read it. And I'm very curious to watch the film now. So anyway, I'm going to end this here. So please like, comment, and subscribe if you like this video. So until we meet again, aloha.